Hey, everybody. It is Matt Bechtel with Book Brilliant, and I've got another episode today. But before I begin on any of that, I just want to pause for a moment and say that we're going to release a couple episodes dedicated to September 11th of 2001. The idea of this is I want to interview people from a couple different perspectives. If you check out episode number 2, I do talk to firefighter Jerry Sanford about that. His book, It Started With a Helmet, is all about his experience there. So I do highly recommend people go back and listen to that episode. But 9/11, it was impactful for everybody who lives in America, and it truly did change the world. I was in second grade when it happened, and every year I try to read a book and do some sort of studying about that. And that's kind of what led me to seek out some guests specifically for this. In the future, I am willing and definitely would love to talk to anyone else who has a perspective on this. If there's anybody listening who may have been there, maybe in a tower, maybe they're a first responder, anything. After September 11th passes this year, this is something that I would still be interested in talking to people about. But today, I've got a great guest for this. His name is Vic Ferrari. He's the author of a few books, which I'll get into here in a second. But Vic is a retired police officer from New York City who was working the day of September 11, 2001, and he was there. And so I really appreciate him coming on and talking about it specifically. If you listen to any of Vic's other interviews, or if you check out his books, you'll notice that Vic is he's a funny guy, and most of his stuff is a little bit more lighthearted, maybe with some gallows humor in there. If you've ever talked to a cop before, that's nothing unique. And you can kind of see that in his books, right? So his very first book ever was Dickheads and Debauchery. He also is the author of NYPD Law and Disorder, Grand Theft Auto, the NYPD's Flying Circus, and NYPD Through the Looking Glass. I ordered all these books because my plan is to read them all and then have Vic back on. I thought that we hit it off right away, and he just seemed like the kind of guy that I could talk to for a long time. And I'm sure he noticed that and was probably getting annoyed before he hopped off. So, Vic, again, thank you for coming on. I think that he has some really good perspectives here, and I'm excited for everybody to listen to it. Vic is on social media. He's on Facebook. I don't know if he's doing a whole lot with it. So I think the number one way to find out more about Vic is to check out his books on Amazon. But let's get started with the interview. All right. Well, Vic, thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I know that a lot of your books and your interviews are kind of funny, and you've got a lot of funny stories. Today might be a little bit more somber, not that it has to be, but I really wanted to focus on September 11th, 2001. You were on the force during that time, and I wanted to get the perspective of a police officer. So thank you for joining me today.
All right, thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate the opportunity.
Of course. So do you have any memories when you were younger of being at the Twin Towers?
Yeah, it's so funny you should bring that up. My father had a brother, he's my uncle, and he wasn't around very much. He worked for the government. He was kind of in and out of our lives. We'd see him every now and then. I was a little boy. I was maybe 5 or 6, and my father one Sunday morning said, "Hey, your uncle's going to come by and take you out for the day." So I was excited, and my brother and I got into his car. We drove all the way down to the west side of Manhattan, and he takes us to the World Trade Center on a Sunday. Now, I had already been there on a school trip, but I didn't say anything. And we go up to the top, and we go back down, and then he buys us lunch. And basically, he was doing his uncle thing for every 3 years. He just he wasn't kid-friendly, but he was trying. So he drops me and my brother off, and my father goes, "Did you thank your uncle?" And I'm thinking to myself, for an elevator ride? Yeah. I was like, "Yeah, Dad, I thanked him." I mean, I was a little boy. But yeah, school trips. The weird thing about the World Trade Center is I was dating someone at the time that worked at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. And a couple of weeks, probably about 2 or 3 weeks before 9/11, we met a girlfriend of hers in the lower concourse of the Trade Center. So I was in there about a week before. And the day before 9/11, she was actually in law school in Philly. So I was taking the Amtrak back. And it was weird because on Amtrak, just before you hit the tunnel to go under the Hudson, there was a great shot of the Manhattan skyline. And I remember looking at the Trade Center, just, not giving it a second thought. What's funny is people don't realize that 9/11 happened on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
And it was an election day. And I was supposed to work election detail that day. And what wound up happening was I had arrested a guy that was going to give us a dirty DMV employee that was pumping out phony driver's license. I think it was out of the Harlem office, or he said he did, or he said he had a lot of information. Yeah. So he was in jail. And on 9/11, I was supposed to go down to the Manhattan DA's office with my sergeant, get him out, and it's called Queen for a day. So you pull him out with the district attorney, and basically anything short of murder, you can't use against him. So you're kind of weighing what he can give you to get him out as a confidential informant.
Yeah.
And Queen for a day never happened because we were supposed to be down at the Manhattan DA's office at 9. So I came in at 7. We were going to leave at 8 and get there by 9. My sergeant was running late. So what wound up happening was I'm like, hey, my sergeant's name was John. I'm like, John, come on, let's go. We're going to be late. Yeah. And one of the cops, our office was on the second floor of a housing police building. I was a detective in the auto crime division. And one of the cops ran upstairs and said, hey, a plane just hit the World Trade Center. So immediately put on the news, and you just saw the flames. You didn't really see anything else. So we thought like somebody with a Cessna or something, a private pilot had a heart attack or something, or didn't think terrorism at first, just, because nobody knew. And while we're watching it, here comes the second plane, and we're like, holy shit, this is bad. So knowing, by that point in my career, I had 14 or 15 years in with the New York City Police Department. So I knew everybody got into uniform because, we're going down there at some point during the day. Yeah. So we all, you couldn't call anybody really by cell phone because the cell phones were out.
Yeah.
So everything was landline, and that was sketchy. So probably by about 1:00, they loaded us into cars, and we all drove down the west side of Manhattan. We parked probably about 10, 15 blocks away, as close as you could with the debris flying around. And then they just broke us up into teams and marched us in there.
What were you thinking? Were you like worried that bombs are going to start dropping next, or what was the atmosphere like? Were you afraid of what's next, or did you just assume that the worst had already happened?
When you're a kid and you don't know what to expect, like the first time you went to Disney World, I know I'm picking out something because usually bad things don't happen to children, but like the first time you go to Disney World, or your parents tell you they're going to take you to see something that you can't wrap your mind around it. It's like, or like people say they see a UFO, like, how does that even work?
Yeah.
I didn't know what to expect, but like by that time in my career, I had seen a lot of bad things and, arrested a lot of bad people. So I knew what to expect, the worst of the worst, but, I was nervous. We were all nervous. We didn't, I do remember that they said that they were grounding all flights, like any flight that was in the air, they were trying to get down and landed at the closest airport to get a handle on this, because they didn't want any other planes up there, crashing into things. Yeah. So I really didn't know why. I was nervous. I'm not going to say that I wasn't. I was curious. There were some guys were more nervous than others. I put myself right in the center. I was going, I just didn't know what to expect.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense. So did you, as an adult, how often, so I want to ask you how often you had to go there for police work, but outside of police work, to skip that question for a second, would you ever go in there as an adult for any other reason? I think it was like mostly law firms and banks. And so I know like when you live in a city that has a tourist attraction, it's, rarely the people that live there are the ones who are visiting it. How often would you go in there like as an adult, if ever, outside of police?
I think I've probably been in that building maybe 4 times I guess I was about 35 years old when that happened. So probably 4 or 5 times at most. School trip with my uncle. I was in the lower concourse with my girlfriend. We were walking a friend to a train, I think. And maybe one other time. You live in New York. There's people always ask, oh, did you see this? I think I went to the Statue of Liberty as an infant. I've seen it a million times, but I never went. I lived in the Bronx for 40 something years.
Yeah.
So it's sad, but it's there, but you don't really take advantage of it.
Yeah. Do you remember, did it sway like crazy up towards the top? Do you remember it all?
Yeah, well, I'm going to get that confused with the Empire State Building, but yeah, there was some of that. I'm not a big height guy. Like, I don't like heights.
Yeah, neither do I.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of times I was supposed to go in a helicopter and take photos of a warehouse in Brooklyn where they were shipping stolen cars out of the country. My lieutenant's like, you have to go. And I'm like, put somebody else in that thing. I'm not going because I'm ordering you. I said, I don't care. Suspend me. I says, I'm not getting in a helicopter. I can't do it.
Yeah. I went to the Sears Tower in Chicago. I've never been to New York, actually, but I've been to the Sears Tower in Chicago. And that one free. I mean, I was like, I never want to go up this high again. I was like 16 years old. And I remember it freaked me out how much it swayed. It just blew my mind. I've never been that high before. I live in Nebraska, right? So being in a city where the buildings are so tall that the streets are shadowy, darker, that just blew my mind. I'd never encountered that before. So yeah, I was kind of curious about that because I think the Twin Towers was mostly like law firms and banks, correct?
Yeah, it was, financial.
Yeah.
Bond trading, commodities.
Do you remember the thunderstorm that happened in New York the night before on September 10th?
Yeah, I remember it was raining. I remember with that train ride.
Yeah.
Coming through Jersey just before. I remember, there was thunderstorms. Yeah,
I was kind of reading a little bit about, because there was an artist that took photos of that thunderstorm, and it was the night before.
Wow.
A great picture. So I can send that to you too, and I'll link it in the show notes.
Cool.
For people to check out. So what about as a police officer? Was there ever problems in the trade centers? Did you guys, I know that there were terrorist attacks prior to September 11th, but did it attract any kind of crime? Was there any, I don't know, bank robberies or any other reason for you guys to be down there, or you to be down there specifically?
Well, I mean, I was in organized crime from my last 10 years. And before that, I was in various units up in the Bronx.
Yeah.
I wouldn't think that the police would get called there a lot. I'm sure it happened. I'm sure for cardiacs. I'm sure for medical reasons.
Yeah.
You had a lot of stores there. So I'm sure retail theft from time to time, someone would get locked up for trying to boost something out of a store. I mean, I'm sure people got arrested in there. It's a good question. I don't really have an answer. I never really did any type of enforcement there.
Yeah. No problem. I was just kind of curious. So the day of 9/11, so you were actually supposed to be in like a courthouse or whatever close by, and you've said before, had your friend, your coworker not been running behind, you would have been down there, and you said, I could have potentially died because first thing we would have done is run to ground zero and stuff. So yeah, could you kind of run us through that day a little bit more? You've got kind of a fascinating story about all of the women's shoes that were left behind.
Yeah.
Could you go into detail about kind of both of those things, the before and the after, I guess?
Sure. So we're up in the Bronx and we're on standby, and a call comes in and it says, all right, going down, the highest ranking guy in my office was our lieutenant. So our lieutenant led a caravan of 4 or 5 cars with 2 or 3 guys per car. We all drove down to the west side. We got out. Our main office, I worked out of a substation. Our main office was based in Queens, and our deputy inspector was there, and more supervisors. So they marched us in, and we were walking around. They handed out like these Home Depot paper filters. I don't know how well they worked, but the second they had one available, I threw it on because you could see the air. And it looked like a ticker tape parade. It was just paper and stuff, plastic bags, and it just was an endless rain on you. It was like a nuclear, like you see like a nuclear holocaust, or you worked in a bakery and someone blew up flour. It was all over you. I mean, you were walking through this stuff. And the weirdest indiscriminate stuff was just laying on the sidewalk. It was weird. Like things got thrown all over the place. And I think it was Broadway. We hit Broadway and then we started heading south. And There wasn't a soul around on the ground, and the whole street, cars, parking meters. You know it's bad when those food truck guys left their food trucks behind. Like those guys, they'll stand there and sell the last hot dog, no matter how bad it is. And they took off and left their food trucks, and everything's covered in white, but you see shoes, hundreds and thousands of pairs of women's shoes, because when they were trying to get the hell out of there, they couldn't run in their heels. They just tossed their heels and ran barefoot. And while we were actually driving down there, you could see people running across the bridges. It was the wildest thing, because first we came down the FDR for a bit, and then we got stuck, and then I think we cut across 57th Street to the west side and came down. But I remember just seeing like tons of barefooted women running around, and down at Ground Zero, there was thousands of shoes. I mean, thousands. So I don't know if I ever told this part, but we went into a building. There was an office building a couple of blocks away from the trade center. And there was the maintenance workers were the only ones behind. They stayed behind. And, we were just talking to them and making small talk. And one of the guys was from Afghanistan. It was the craziest thing. And he starts going into, I had heard on the news about the Taliban. I knew about Al-Qaeda. Yeah. But I didn't really know much about the Taliban other than they were always blowing up statues and they weren't happy, and he went into chapter and verse about how they took over his country. And I mean, it was like a master class in terrorism and just what's going on in that region from a guy that was like a porter in a building. I mean, educated guy. I don't know what he did in Afghanistan, but he basically spelled out chapter and verse what was going on in his country. Jeez. So we got closer. So we took a break in there, and then we got closer. We got to Ground Zero, and the facade of the trade center came straight down and embedded itself in the debris. And I didn't know what that was. It looked like the biggest piece of lattice I had ever seen for like a yard. And someone goes, no, that's the facade. And I said, holy shit. And then by then there were more people down there. There were people from the military. There was some guy in a spacesuit with a friggin' Geiger counter or some kind of device. I have no idea what it was. He was wandering around. It was making all sorts of noise. I guess they were checking for radiation. There was a lot going on down there. I was down there from probably 1:00 in the afternoon, and I didn't go home. They pulled us out of there about 5, 6 in the morning. They made us go to the east side of Manhattan, and they had cops with like buckets of water that you would stand in, and then they would kind of hose you off, like try to get some of that stuff off of you, like the asbestos and everything else that was on you. They were kind of like trying to decontaminate the best they could, but wasn't doing anything. The second I got home, I took all my stuff off and I threw it in the washing machine.
Yeah.
It was wild. I mean, just like I said, it was the weird, like if you watch an episode of Hoarders, like where they're going through someone's garage and there's all sorts of crap just laying around. There was like everything from like children's toys, like that someone might have had on their desk, to a laptop or like a PC that was just sitting there like in perfect condition, to something that was just photos. It was the wildest shit, just kind of like churned together.
Yeah, I can't even imagine, but yeah, I'm sure there was all kinds of debris. It's funny, I don't even want to go into detail right now about everything going on in Afghanistan, because I'm trying to get somebody from the military or somebody on who can really give me a better analysis, who's on the ground. But, I'll say this. I read the book. There's a book about Osama bin Laden's capture and shooting called Manhunt, I think is what it's called. And it's like, for how people say how short-sighted the U.S. military was with it, it's like, who was really short-sighted was Osama bin Laden, thinking that he was going to take down the 2 biggest towers in the world in America, and that we weren't going to do anything about it. It's like that was some real short-sightedness right there. When I study, 9/11, and I try to do it every year, I try to read some new books about it, and I just get so pissed, because it's like it was such a pointless thing for them to attack it for what, I mean, there's I've read speculation that was something that bin Laden regretted doing, because he didn't think we were going to, respond the way that we did. But
you got to
that's kind of crazy that
you got to ask yourself, as dedicated as he was, right? I mean, he was safe in that cave. No one was really looking for him. I mean, he had already hit the coal, right? He had already bombed the coal. I think he was involved in Tanzania, and the other one,
Mogadishu. He was.
Yeah, right. And if we could have gotten our hands on him, we would have. But we really weren't trying for him. Like, he was really like, it's like a kid that just keeps fucking with you, and it's like, all right. Yeah. So I don't think, I think he thought that, and I'm not a terrorism expert. I think he thought Pakistan was going to welcome him with open arms. Mm-hmm. And I mean, they let him stay there, but I don't think it was the life he thought he was going to get out of it. And yeah, I think you're right. I think he underestimated us. And I think it definitely changed his life. It fucked up his life, that he was looking over his shoulder. Like, he couldn't believe 10 years later, they're still coming for me. And, you know, my top guys are getting picked off and droned and captured and everything else. Yeah,
I think it's kind of mind-blowing too, that my understanding is what he thought, because of Black Hawk Down, he really felt like, oh, they didn't do anything to respond to Black Hawk Down, so they won't do anything in response to this. And it's like, that's quite the leap of logic, that, you know, taking down 2 Black Hawk helicopters in Mogadishu, you know, is going to elicit the same response as taking down 2 towers in New York City. You know, it's like, those are not the same thing, you know? So yeah, that if anybody was short-sighted, I think that falls on him. Now, did you know anybody that day, either on the police force or other people? Did you know anybody that day that had passed?
Yeah, I actually did. 2 police officers that died. I didn't know them well. One was from my neighborhood. I used to see him around. I didn't really know him. Another guy, Tommy Langone, worked in the 45th precinct when I was a kid. I always liked him. He was a nice guy. A guy I went to high school with, I later found out, died. And my friend's mother, another kid I went to high school with, his mom worked in the Trade Center. I didn't know a lot of people, but off the top of my head, yeah, there were 4 that lost their lives in there.
And did you know, I don't know, I mean, geez, New York City's so big. Like, in my town, the cops and firefighters they know each other. Maybe some of them are friends, but they at least all know each other, I think. Did you know any of those firefighters then that had passed, or anybody that was there fighting it as a firefighter?
No, I didn't know. Actually, I didn't know any of the firemen that perished in 9/11. I mean, New York is so big. I mean, the New York City Police Department's got, at any point, between 30 and 40,000 members. I don't know what the FDNY has. I don't have an answer for that. But I mean, 5 boroughs, they're all over. I think there's probably more firehouses than police stations. So there's a lot. I mean, you know.
Yeah. Well, in my town, I live in a town outside of Omaha that's got about 27,000 people. Right. So the police department of New York is bigger than my town. And like you've said before, it's bigger than most countries' armies are. So yeah, I figured that, you know, maybe you knew some people, maybe you didn't. So after that, I wanted to ask you, how long did it take before the assholes started coming in and impersonating cops and firefighters? Was that immediate? Was that a week after? How soon was it that people started?
Fast. It happened. Yeah, there were people in there probably within the first couple of days, because it was such madness, and they tried to get a containment around it. Well, I remember the second day, like maybe the 12th or the 13th. I would think it would be impossible to be the 12th, but probably the 13th. I remember less than a couple of blocks from the Trade Center, there was a Winnebago there. A bunch of Chicago cops had jumped into a Winnebago, drove across the country, and set up camp to help. And it was the funniest thing in the world. They had written, "Fuck you, Bin Laden." In the, you saw that all over the place, like the cars that were like just covered in dust. You'd see, you know, "Fuck you, Bin Laden," and all sorts of shit. You saw a lot of cops down there from different police departments. I remember there was a bunch of people from canine, just tons of people with canine rescue dogs there was a couple of girls there from Missouri. But yeah, there was the scam artists started going in there and trying to steal shit, because FEMA had started dropping off supplies and volunteers were dropping off supplies. And then you had famous people that were coming down there that just wanted to say thank you. Like I met Robert De Niro down there. I met Billy Baldwin down there. De Niro was like the Messiah. De Niro showed up like a week or two later, maybe more. And we were all just kind of sitting around taking a break. And it was like the Messiah was walking through. Everybody just starts jumping up like, what the fuck is this? And then he's coming. I'm like, who the fuck is coming? They go, De Niro. I go, get out of here. And I mean, most cops are city kids who grew up in New York watching mob movies. And he just, he's got that face with the mole and he's just kind of making that face and he's shaking hands. And my sergeant goes, here's your chance. He just kind of shoved me in front of my, Mr. Niro, I think you're a great actor. Thank you. And he just kept going. Freeman McNeil from the Jets was there. He was a former running back. There was a lot of famous people down there that just wanted to say thank you and, entertain or just, be down there, be a part of it.
How close did you get to Bush? Did you get close to Bush at all when he was there?
No, I did not. You know who I actually saw? This is a funny story. It's not funny, but it is funny. Who was the name of that congressman that they suspected in the death of his girlfriend? The girl's name was Chandra Levy.
Well, first of all, any of the Kennedys? No. I'm trying to think of what did you say her name was?
The girl's name was Chandra Levy. She was dating a married sitting congressman or senator. I think his name was Gary.
I'm pulling it up. Let's see. I'm looking it up right now. Gary Condit?
That sounds about right.
Yeah, I think that's who it is. Yeah.
What state was he from?
Ooh, let me look.
Sorry, I apologize.
You're
giving you homework.
No, I love it. Let's see. American former politician, California.
Okay, so we're down. This is about a week or two after, and this girl had gone missing. And, they didn't, all they knew was he was married. She was having an affair with him, and now she's missing. So, I mean, obviously he's a suspect. It turned out he didn't do it. He had nothing to do with it.
Okay.
But it was in the newspaper. It was all, I mean, you couldn't put on the news and, I want to say this poor guy, he's having an affair, but at the same time, he had nothing to do with this woman's disappearance or death.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of people from Congress down there, and there's like a contingency, like a bunch of VIPs, and they're walking by. And this guy that I work with, who's not that smart, like points at him. He's less than 5 feet away. He goes, hey, that's the fucking guy that's suspected in that woman's death. And we were just so tired and delirious. Like we were working like 14, 15-hour days. And this guy is walking by with, a bunch of congressmen and senators surveying the area, trying to get funds down there. And this guy that I work with goes, hey, isn't that the fucking guy that's suspected that? But like pointing at him like a kid, a kid would like your parent would want to smack the kid. Like, mind.
Yeah.
And he looked at us, put his head down and just kept going.
Damn. Yeah, no kidding. There was when you're talking about what people were drawing, I saw a photo not too long ago that said it said "fuck peace, give war a try." Somebody give war a chance. Somebody had written that in the windows because I mean I was really young when 9/11 happened, but I do remember like everybody wanted to go kick some ass. Everybody wanted to go overseas and fight anybody who had anything to do with that. It wasn't like a kumbaya moment right away.
No. It's actually a unifying moment.
Yes. Yeah, it was. It was it was very unifying at first. And I think that the approval ratings when we first started deploying was like really high. It wasn't until we started like messing around in Iraq, I think, is when people were kind of starting to question things. But yeah, I think at first everybody was like, let's get
the mindset was someone's going to fucking pay for this.
Exactly. Yeah. So, it's funny when you talk about, well, it's not funny when you talk about the people impersonating cops and shit right away, but it sounds like they had stuff to steal. In my town, a couple of years ago, we had a flood where the whole town basically became an island. There were some dams that broke, and a lot of people lost their houses, and it completely like made an island out of our town. We couldn't get out of it. And all these people were making these dramatic Facebook posts talking about how we've pulled together and, we're doing so well and there's no looting. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? I knew the cops at the time. I'm like, there was people going in like in a flood, breaking into houses, like wading through water. And the cops had to be like, hey, what are you doing? Because there's all these guys trying to break into obviously trying to break into a house in a flood zone. So it's like criminals are shitheads and they'll stop at nothing to screw somebody over, But yeah, so what exactly were the police impersonators and the fire impersonators, were they just trying to steal stuff or what?
Yeah, they'd sneak in. Like what they would do is they would sneak in, and like they had little, like you could walk into one of those, like they had a church set up. There was a bunch of different places where you could, they were so nice to us. I mean, you get a massage, you know, I mean, after a while there was hot food and stuff, and there was just cases of soda and food and snacks and whatever you could think of. And they would steal shit. Or I remember FEMA, they donated these golf carts and motorized scooters and stuff, and then they started vanishing. They caught some of them, and then you had people that were raising money for bullshit. There was a ton of that, like collecting money for things.
That's so ridiculous. Why? And it's like, why are you stealing food? Like you could shoplift that at any time. You don't need a world tragic event to steal cases of supplies like that. So, could you? I'm trying to think about how I want to add the next one. Let's go to Giuliani. So, what did you think about Giuliani's leadership when this happened? What were your thoughts on that? How he responded?
I think he did a great job. I don't think anybody could have done any better. I think I was telling you earlier, Giuliani pulled New York. I mean, before 9/11, New York was the Wild West. Rudy came in with his guys and basically cleaned things up. And then the press, he was a lame duck mayor. He was in his second term, and they turned on him. They were into his divorce. They were into his prostate cancer treatment. I mean, they were just the guy couldn't catch a break. They were just beating up on him about it. Anything he did was wrong. 9/11 came around. Everybody, you know, the reporters and everything were cowering. Everybody was nervous. And he went in there. He was like a general. He went in there and straightened things out. And, you know, he made himself the front man from it. He didn't hide from it. Yeah. He gave people reason to come out. You know, people weren't coming out of their houses in the other outer boroughs. They were afraid what's going to happen next. And he was a calming influence. He was a strong influence. I think Rudy did a great job with 9/11.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I read part of his book, Leadership, and it seemed like from reading that he seemed like he handled that pretty well. And I think even a lot of the people that criticize him will, if they're being fair, will say he did good. But I always want to double check that with people that were actually there, because it's like, Cuomo wrote a leadership book after COVID, and it's kind of come out that, he wasn't doing as hot as he thought. So I like to ask anybody that was there, how they thought the mayor, responded, and not just because it's Giuliani, but just because he was the mayor at the time, So could you tell the story of how you knew that that things were back to normal when you were in the Bronx?
Yeah. So I was telling you earlier, so we would drive down there, like this is weeks after or days after, we would drive down there in caravans. We had vans. So we would jump in these vans and drive down to Ground Zero in the morning. We're doing like 12-hour shifts. So we get down there at 6, 7 in the morning, and we leave 6, 7 at night. And we're coming up the West Side Highway, and they call it the West Side Highway, but it's just the 3-lane street. And people were out there waving flags at us and cheering us on. And it was really nice, egging us on. Thank you, with signs and stuff. And we get we drive over the bridge, we get into the Bronx, and we get cut off by a gypsy cab. And the gypsy cab driver didn't know we were the police because we were unmarked van, and he's telling us to go fuck us. And I said, look at this, we're in the Bronx and we're scumbags overnight. Yeah. But I got another funny story. So I think a day or two after 9/11, they had us going up on rooftops just to see if there's debris up there or body parts up there. So I'll never forget, I was on Murray Street. It's a small street in Lower Manhattan. And I'm there with a guy who's a little reactionary. It was the funniest thing in the world. He and I go up on the roof, and there's a piece of a landing gear up on the roof. Wow. Some kind of, it was part of the plane. It looked like something for the hydraulics of the landing gear. So I go, oh shit. And he goes, holy shit, you better start writing this down in your memo book. And I go, why? I says, we'll tell them it's up here. He goes, we could be going to trial for this. I said, trial for what? I says, whoever did this is going to get pounded into dust. Are you kidding me? Yeah. He thought of it like down the road, we were going to go to court on this and be, expert witnesses that we found the fuselage of a plane or landing gear on a plane on a roof over us. I'm like, fucking snap yourself back into reality.
Yeah, no kidding. They couldn't possibly interview everybody who saw.
I could write a book about that guy, but I won't.
That's really funny. Man, that's wild. Okay, you started, I think, working like insurance fraud cases afterwards. So what was the timeline of, so 9/11 happens, you're at ground zero. How long were you working ground zero? How long were you there before you started kind of transitioning back to the office and maybe doing like insurance fraud cases? How long was that time period?
We were down there for 9/11. My office, the Bronx office, the auto crime division, we were down there for like the first 10 days. Then they pulled us out, and then we would go like maybe once a month. But what they really did with us was the debris had to go somewhere, and they were there's a dump out in Queens. It's a tremendous place. It's called the Fresh Kills Dump. They had closed it. They opened it up, and they started bringing dump trucks of debris out there and sifting through it there. And all the cars went out there. So my team, our office was we were going out to Staten Island, which you can't get any further from the Bronx to Staten Island. It's like 50 miles, and it's not in straight and narrow. There's bridges and twists and turns. It takes like 2 hours to get there. But we were going there a couple of times a week, and with the recovered vehicles that were crushed, they were getting pulled out of the debris. We were opening them up with the jaws of life to make sure that there wasn't anybody in there. And also, you had people, they were afraid, and I'm sure it happened, people were filing insurance claims. So they wanted to account for all the cars that were down there. So we were down at the dump. We were going down there quite regularly, which that place is like the surface of the moon. I mean, you got these tremendous dump trucks I had never seen before, like earth movers. And the place looks like the moon. And they had us in these Tyvek suits, and I'm sure it's like a cancer ground down there. But we were going down there quite a bit, and they had these little trailers for us set up. And then we were doing the auto aspect of it, but like other cops they were bringing in, they just had a conveyor belt of debris going by, and they were sifting through it for driver's licenses and body parts, or, personal items that they could get back to loved ones.
Yeah. That's and so then when you were doing the insurance fraud, it kind of blows my mind, but I also know how humans are, that people were trying to set up, phony insurance claims saying that their cars were damaged. Is that what it was? Like people said that their cars were damaged when they weren't, stuff like that?
Or gone.
Yeah.
Basically saying the car, I parked down there, and I guess it was destroyed. I didn't catch a case like that. I'm sure our Queens office did.
So I know that you've said that you felt like kind of being a cop had helped you recover from that. You didn't have as much, I don't know if you call it post-traumatic stress, or it just felt like maybe you were able to bounce back a little bit faster. And that's because, for a variety of reasons as a cop. I mean, if you're getting in shootouts, stuff like that, you're seeing, but the firefighters, they see, a lot of bodies too. Do you think that part of what helped you kind of recover was that, eventually you were able to go back to another case? You were able to go back to, auto crime at that point, or there was always another case for you to do outside of 9/11. Whereas firefighters, I think they kind of had that in their face for a very long time, and they had to live in it, and they lost, a lot of firefighters as well. Do you think that maybe it had helped you kind of recover?
Well, I've been accused by loved ones that I worry about the wrong things. I didn't, honestly. I mean, I'm wired differently. I mean, by that part of my career, again, I had seen so many bad things. Yeah. It didn't freak me out. I don't think I'm traumatized from it. I've never had a nightmare about it. Last night, I usually don't remember my dreams. You know what I dreamed about last night? I'm sitting in Catholic high school, and there's one test I got to take to pass so I won't go to summer school. And it's like in Russian. And there's not even a kid I can sit next to that I can copy his answers. Like the answer keys were all different with the kids sitting next to me. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I'm going to go to summer school again, because I went to Catholic high school. I wound up going to summer school because I was just having too much fun. Yeah. But I've been accused of worrying about the wrong things, but that I didn't have it. I mean, they brought us down and had us talk to counselors and stuff. And it bothered me, but it didn't freak me out. I didn't have PTSD from it, or I guess I'm wired differently. Yeah.
Well, that stuff affects everybody differently. And I think like I've talked to a friend of mine who was one of the first cops in the Von Maur shooting in Omaha. Have you ever heard of that? The Von Maur shooting. Basically, this kid went into Von Maur, like in our mall, and it was just a shopping center, and he shot a bunch of people. And one of my this was a long time ago too, but a friend of mine was with the first cops that went in there, and his story is kind of crazy because he said they get this call and they get there, and the SWAT team's outside putting their vests on, and they're like, "Well, we're waiting to go in," and they said, "Screw that, we're going in." So he said they run in through the food court, and all these people are eating just like normal. And so they kind of run in with their guns and they stop and they're like, "You guys got to go." And so then after that, he said the rest of the mall there was nobody. All the shops were shut down and locked down.
So you're close.
Yeah. And he said he goes into the store and he said it was just quiet, but there was Christmas music playing. And he's like, "I'll never forget that Christmas music playing." And he's like, "We went up and then you saw, he's like, once we got in there, you're seeing all these bodies, and then kind of people start eventually piling out of like clothing racks and all these hiding spots." But he had said, he's like, it bothered some of the guys I was with. It didn't really bother me. He's like, I've always had a little bit of morbid curiosity, and I was on a volunteer fire department. And I joined it when I was 17, and like my best friend and I, he's still a firefighter, but as kids, we always had morbid curiosity too. When we were at a call, if there's an accident or something, they tried to kind of keep us away when we were younger until they knew that we could handle it.
Handle it.
We were always the kind of kids that were, you were kind of like looking because you wanted to see the body. And I think that you have to have a little bit of that in order to do anything with first responding. Because if you can't handle blood, you need to find something else to do.
Right. Yeah. Right. Or you freeze. So, if you freeze when things are going bad.
Yeah. Of course. But what about the other guys you work with? Did anybody ever tell you like, "Hey, I'm really rattled by that"? Did anybody retire early?
Nobody. No. Nobody I worked with. Nobody in my office. Everybody in my office had handled it fine. There were people, not that I worked with, but other people that didn't handle it well. And as a result, I don't know what happened to them, but I know that they were in therapy. They were talking to somebody.
Yeah, I was just talking to a guy in the Army this past week at my church, and he's like, "Dude, there's deep." He's like, "The Taliban goes deep. There's sleeper cells in America. They're everywhere, man. They're going deep, and they're recruiting, slowly." And it's something I've studied a little bit. I think that I think they have zero plans to leave us alone. And I don't believe for a second, that our time over there was wasted. I think maybe there's some things we could have done differently and efficiently, and we'll see what happens in the future. But I don't think for a second that this is over. We'll see if there's more attacks in America. Hopefully not. But there's a lot that can go. We have a lot of enemies right now, whether it's Taliban, China, the cartels. I think that's going to be a threat, sooner than later. There's a lot kind of going on right now. And so I think people should stay on guard and think about how they can best protect their family and have situational awareness. And that's kind of, I don't plan on talking about this with probably anybody else I interview over the course of, covering, 9/11's 20-year anniversary. But what does kind of piss me off about the conspiracy theories is that it takes people are like, "Oh, if it was an inside job, I don't have to worry." No, I don't think it was an inside job at all. And I think that we do need to be worried about foreign threats. Does that ever piss you off here in the conspiracy theory?
Oh, my cousin one time, she was in college and she started with that. And I says, "Were you down there?" She goes, "Well, no, but you got to think outside the box." And my professor, I said, "No." I said, "Yeah, not an inside job." I says, "I was down there."
There was all the jokes about, people were saying, that, jet fuel can't melt steel beams. And it's like, well, think about it for a second. It may not be able to melt it completely, but it can
weaken it.
Damage the integrity. The other thing that people say, like, well, jet should tip a tower over. And it's like, we don't have any models to base this off of with physics. Yes, planes have crashed into other things. The great one is when people bring up the Empire, that there was an advertisement against the Twin Towers back in the day saying that planes would fly into it, and people use that as some kind of weird foreshadowing. Well, dummies. if you would research it at all, you would know that there was a lot of people who were against the towers being built. They thought it was too invasive. They thought that planes were going to fly into it on accident, which is what happened during World War II, in the Empire State Building. It was not some weird global foreshadowing Illuminati thing that people want to say it was. And my understanding, and I've been there's a book called Fall and Rise, I believe. And they talk about the infrastructure of it because I rented the book from the library. I need to grab it again to study it because they kind of go into detail about how the way it was built is kind of why it fell the way it did, why it actually fell, because nobody thought it was going to fall. People thought it was just going to kind of stay there, I think. Like the firefighters and stuff who were going up, I don't think anybody anticipated it collapsing. But my understanding is like some laws were kind of grandfathered in that shouldn't have been, and that's kind of why things happen the way that they did. Which is why if you really study 9/11, and I'm not talking about going on YouTube and watching conspiracy videos, but actually reading books and talking to people like yourself and talking and studying from people who were there and actually know something about it. It's heartbreaking because you're just thinking like this can't happen. Like there's so many minor adjustments along the way that had they been made, whether it was the building of it or like you had said, some of our federal agencies, like some of our law enforcement departments following up on certain things and the federal agencies as well. I mean, I think those guys were training in Florida when they were flying those planes, like
somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. They had thought this out. I mean, their full-time job was how to destroy America. That's what they woke up every day thinking about. They didn't go work at McDonald's and Kinko's and then, for a couple hours before they went to bed, pondered how to take this country down. They were funded to, that's all they did. Right. And so the only reason I'm talking about it with you is because I think you're kind of cool enough about it that, you're more approachable with it. But I'm not going to bring this up to a firefighter or a victim of it. It's just a stupid thing to talk about. But I was kind of curious about what your thoughts were whenever you encounter those kind of conspiracies.
I think there were multiple. When we pulled down there, I just remember, when we pulled down there, one of the buildings was on fire because it was like 1 World Trade, 5 World Trade. One of the buildings was on fire. It looked like Universal Studios, something like you could feel the fucking heat. We were in a bus and 20-story building, whatever it was, there was just flames coming out of every window. Yeah. And I love when people go, oh, well, that wouldn't have fallen down. I'm like, the fucking building was on fire. Like I saw it, and we got the fuck away from it. And we pulled a couple of blocks away. And then, I don't know, a half hour later or something, you could hear it come down. Yeah. It wasn't an explosion. It just imploded because of the weight and everything else. I mean. Yeah. Did you see it go down or did you just hear it? Heard it. Jeez. Yeah, that's interesting. You say that with the heat too. It's like if people have ever been to, if they've never been to like a real fire, if you go to like a concert and when they shoot the flames out or whatever on the, you can feel it. Yeah, you can feel that heat press against your face. So if you're feeling that, if that fire is 20 stories up and you're, how far away were you said when you felt it? We were like in the middle of the street, but like those buildings, it wasn't like right on the street. There was like a courtyard. Yeah. So, I mean, there was a distance, but you could feel the heat. I mean, it was that intense. And I mean, we were in a bus with the windows down. I don't know, like there was like a courtyard, but I mean, that thing was rocking and rolling, man. I mean,
when I read about like the firefighter Oriole Palmer who like made it all the way up to the actual like where the plane had hit, it's just like so mind blowing. Like that's why like that guy to me is a true hero and a badass because it's like I don't know how he did it. I mean, I have no idea how he got all the way to the top and stuff. But that's
what on 9/11.
Yeah, on 9/11, he didn't
survive.
He did not survive, no. But yeah, I think he got all the way to the top, like where the plane had actually hit, I believe. Do you know who he is? Have you ever heard of him?
No, this is news to me. That's why I asked.
Yeah. Oriole Palmer, I think his radio was going out, but he was like, I forget exactly what he was. But I would love to talk to anybody from his family because he's just, when you study him, I talked to Jerry Sanford about him because he kind of knew him, but like this guy basically, I don't know if he was solo or if he was with his team, but I think he was solo for a lot of it. His radio was going out and he was trying to clear it and see how far they could go up. So he got all the way up to like where the towers or where the plane had hit the towers. And he was radioing in like, all right, this is where I'm at. This is where I'm at. He was trying to clear the way. And again, I don't think he had any idea that the towers were going to collapse. That's why he went up there solo, because his plan was figuring out kind of like how far they could go up and where they needed to help. So he was like kind of radioing instructions on the way. That takes balls in and of itself. Even if you don't think that the tower is going to collapse, it's still intense to think like that guy had no guarantee he was going to be able to get back down when he did that. So those are the stories that when people think about 9/11, think about that stuff. Don't think about some bullshit, that meme that your cousin shared on YouTube.
Oh, I know.
But yeah, but man, that's you've got a heck of a perspective and interesting stories from the police side. I really appreciate you coming on. I like talking to you. So, what I'm going to do is once I'm going to finish all your books, and then I want to have you back on again.
Sure.
And we'll talk about your books, and then we'll maybe have a lighter conversation, tell some funny stories, and just talk about policing, and we'll solve all the world's problems together while we talk. How about that?
Sounds like a plan.
Well, thanks for joining me today, Vic. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Vic, again, thank you for coming onto the show. It really meant a lot. Again, he was the kind of guy that I really did just hit it off with right away. We got the joke in before and after the show, and he's a great guy, and I really look forward to having him back on. So again, you can find him on Facebook under author Vic Ferrari, and then you can find all of his books, all of these bad boys. You can get these on Amazon as well. Again, he's the author of Dickheads and Debauchery, Grand Theft Auto, NYPD Law and Disorder, the NYPD's Flying Circus, and NYPD Through the Looking Glass. So please check out his books. Again, if you like the podcast, if you like the idea of what we've been doing, please help us out. And you can do that in some very simple ways. Number one, if you're watching us on YouTube, please leave a nice comment and like the video, as well as subscribing to us. That's huge. Subscribe to us on all platforms. Give us a like on Facebook at Book Brilliant. On Twitter, we're @BBookBrilliant. We're even on TikTok at @BBookBrilliant as well. And then on Instagram, we are just Book Brilliant. So if you could give us a like and a follow on those pages, that significantly helps us out. On our website at bookbrilliant.com, I have the show notes for this. I've got links. Any book that we mentioned gets thrown in there. And that way you can find the book easily and order it if you would like. Again, thank you everybody for listening. And my heart goes out to the families and the victims and everybody who was directly impacted from 9/11. It's crazy that it was 20 years ago. And man, is the world different since then. So I hope that these episodes give people some perspective on that. Thank you again for listening. Have a great day.